now by the Security Minister, Damian Hinds. Hello to you. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme this morning. A bit chilly this morning, isn't it? And we might all be turning the heat up a little bit at home. Certainly, there's a row between the Business Secretary and also the Treasury. The Business Secretary suggesting that government will be looking into whether to step in to help business struggling with high energy prices. The Treasury ringing Sam Coates and saying he's just making that up. Who do you believe?
Well, this is a difficult situation. We've got these rising gas prices globally, and that is difficult. That's difficult for some business. I think, as you mentioned in your report, it's also really, really important that we think about the consumer in this, and the price cap is a really important part of protection for consumers, along with programmes like, the Warm Homes discount and so on. But of course, the Business Secretary is focused on the effects on business, as you'd rightly expect. And I know Kwasi is in very regular talks, carries on being in regular talks with industry, including those energy-intensive industries who, of course, have been having support over an extended period to help to manage their situation as we move to a lower carbon and eventually a zero carbon, net zero future.
But does he tell porkies?
No, of course not.
So why are the Treasury saying he's making things up?
Well, look, these unnamed sources stories come out from time to time. The fact is, government departments, government ministers talk to each other the whole time. And of course, with an issue like this, with these rising global prices and businesses having to grapple with that, having to deal with it for, to make sure they break even and can make a margin, of course, that is something that the Business Secretary and, of course, the Energy Secretary is going to be totally focused on. Something the Treasury, of course, is also very, very focused on as the economic management department, if you like, of the nation.
So your understanding is then that the Treasury is potentially keeping a watchful eye on whether they need to step in to support business?
I think the Treasury is always keeping a watchful eye right across the economy, and so is the Business Department. I mean, we've just had a period where we've used this word unprecedented a lot over the last couple of years. But the amount of business support that's gone, it's about £100 billion on the business support aspect, really has been, world leading as well as unprecedented. And you heard again from the Prime Minister in his conference speech last week that the private sector industry is the energy, is the engine, of our economy. It's what creates wealth, it's what creates jobs, it's what puts food on all of our tables. It's what affords the public services that we all rely upon. Interestingly,
the head of UK Steel is not as confident as you are about what's going on. He's implored the Prime Minister to bang heads together. What do you think?
So look, the steel sector is one of those energy-intensive industries, which of course has particular challenges. And, over the last 8 years or so, quite a lot of money has gone in to help to support those energy-intensive sectors, steel being one of them. There are others as well, to deal with energy costs and this transition that we have to make to a lower carbon future and eventually to net zero. But of course, the head of UK Steel, quite rightly, is going to be concerned about the situation we're in and are going to want to have a lot of focus on it.
Yeah, and a lot of workers who are at the Red Wall as well will be very concerned. The head of UK Steel saying there has to be longer and longer pauses between production. That must be of some concern.
Of course, these things are of concern. There's also been some encouraging news, of course, in the last day or so with Liberty Steel. But that is a sector, and we know what the underlying issues are with that sector, particularly this sort of huge global production, much coming from China, of course, which does make makes the competitive conditions difficult. But British Steel, UK Steel, is a particularly high quality product. It's a strategic product as well, and government's been really, really clear over this extended period since 2013, when the support's been going, about how important that is to the whole of our economy.
Now, I remember back in 1973, I'm sure you don't, December 1973, that it was a Conservative government that introduced a 3-day working week for reasons that people who were around at the time will remember. Obviously, you're not going to go back to that. But is there some sense, potentially, of building in a more formal pause procedure for these big businesses?
What do you mean by a formal pause procedure?
So we heard from the head of UK Steel, who is saying more and more pauses. Is there potentially an opportunity for the Prime Minister and potentially also the Chancellor to say, you know what, we're going to put those pauses together and make it 4 days a week rather than 5 days a week working at the moment?
No, so I mean, we live in a country where the government doesn't set the pattern of the working week, and
Well,
rightly
they did
so.
in the 1970s.
Well, thank God we've moved past the 1970s, and we have overall we have an underlyingly strong economy, and we've seen that in the way we've had this.
Doesn't feel like it at the moment, Minister.
Well, hang on. If you think about, Kay, as I know you do regularly, what we've been through, what the whole world's been through, this shock. It's not just been a health crisis; it's been a huge economic shock as well. But actually, the way that the UK economy has been coming back has been truly impressive, actually. And the way that unemployment hasn't reached nearly the levels that people were predicting 12 or 18 months ago. We have seen there is an underlying strength in the economy. Of course, that's the most important thing, both for all these businesses and the sectors that you've been speaking about, and of course for families up and down the country as well.
Yeah, but there are challenges in production, as illustrated, and we've just discussed. There are challenges in trying to make sure that there's enough food on supermarket shelves, to the extent where the Prime Minister has come up with a ZAR to try to make sure that there aren't gaps on supermarket shelves for Christmas. There's gaps in having enough road haulage people. And apparently we wanted 5,000 Europeans to come over and leave on Christmas Eve. I think 27 have applied so far. We are in a difficult position.
Well, Kay, there's been a whole series of things that the government has come forward with in support of industry on some of those supply chain issues. And again, look, I do have to come back to this enormous shock that we've had as a result of the coronavirus and all the kind of knock-on effects that has had, including, for example, delays to relicensing, to training programmes and so on for lorry drivers. We have, as you know, put in place these various measures for more HGV drivers to come in, to bring forward testing and licensing, specifically on the fuel, the deployment of military personnel to do that. So, I mean, a whole range of things. But nobody diminishes the scale of some of these challenges. And of course, it's absolutely imperative to get it right.
Interestingly, I was walking up a hill with a lorry driver last week, and he was telling me that youngsters, 17-year-olds, if they're in the military, can drive an HGV truck. You have to be 21 to do it in Civvy Street. Surely that's something we could be looking at.
It's a fair challenge. I wasn't on that hill with you to get the rest of that conversation, all the background. Look, I'm not going to sit here on Sky and start making a pronouncement on a question like that, because I don't know the full detail.
But is it something you should be looking at?
I don't know the full detail. Hang on, I'm coming on to that. I don't know the full detail, but it is, of course, right that we look at all these kind of questions and make sure we get it right. We need to make sure that all these careers are attractive careers, and they're attracting the right kind of numbers of people, and we need to make sure that they are, sufficiently well paid as well, with sufficiently attractive conditions to bring people into those jobs. And the Prime Minister, again, last week was rightly talking about a high wage, high productivity economy. That's what we need to be striving for. Extra visas and stuff, bringing people in. That is not the sustainable long-term answer. The sustainable answer is making sure these careers are attractive.
Yeah, but he promised that he'd be watching this morning. I said that I would ask the Minister on his behalf, and his and a lot of other road haulage association users, is it something that seems like a good idea on the face of it?
Well, like I say, I wasn't on the hill with you and the lorry driver to hear the rest of the detail.
Well, how much more detail do you need?
On the face of it,
how much more detail do you need?
Well, I don't know until I see it. But on the face of it, of course, these are things to think about and to make sure we get that balance right. There are usually reasons why regulations are in place, but it's also right to challenge them and say, are they still relevant? Are they still necessary? Are they getting in the way of some other thing that we need to do? So thank you to you and to him or her for bringing it up.
There you go, Steve. I said I would mention it, and the Minister said he'll have a look at it. He'll have a look at it for you. The other thing to say is somebody else who's up a hill at the moment is the Prime Minister. Is it right that he should be on holiday when the country's going to hell in a handcart?
Well, I mean, the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister, and when you're Prime Minister, you never stop being in charge and in touch, and a phone call away, or these days, a text message and whatever else have you.
Lost his job because of that.
Away from what's going on, and the Prime Minister never stops being in charge of government. I think it's also right, Kay, and I think I think your viewers would tend to agree with this as well, that actually it's important that people do have a break, do have some downtime in a pressurised job like a highly pressurised job like the PMs. I think that's probably, even more so the case. And family time is important.
Yeah, I'm sure people don't disagree with that, but it's now the right time.
Well, okay, when is the right time? I mean, I think it's important that people do have an opportunity to be with their families, to have some relaxing, unwinding. But I wouldn't want to overstate the amount of unwinding or relaxing that you get to do as Prime Minister, because, as I say, you are constantly in touch. You are constantly being briefed, and you remain in charge of the government. It's incredibly high.
Do you
high pressure
accept, though, on any level, that the optics are not good when people are turning up the heat and can't really afford it at home, and the PM's sunning himself on a lounger in Spain?
So look, I would come back to what I just said. I mean, he remains in charge, right? He's the Prime Minister. I think it's also right and important, actually. It's actually important for him and his family. It's also important for the rest of us, actually, for the whole country, that the Prime Minister does get to have some family time, does get to have a break.
So while he's abroad, 1,100 people have risked their lives in 2 days trying to get to this country over the weekend. The French are saying we've not paid the £54 million that we promised them to help with the policing on that side of the channel. Isn't it time we paid up?
Well, we have a good and constructive relationship with the French authorities.
I'm not sure the French always agree with you on that.
And the work that they do along that coast is incredibly important, and it is life-saving, by the way, to stop people coming across the channel or attempting to come across the channel in that way. And some of these gangs that make a profit on putting people's life in danger, they have to be. You've seen these pictures, I'm sure. They have to be stopped. I mean, it is heartbreaking to see this, and as I say, the French authorities' work is absolutely invaluable in that regard. We do have this arrangement with them that you mentioned of providing some resourcing so they could increase the numbers of people involved in that. And we're working out the mechanisms for that payment. That's an administrative.
You just get their bank details and give it to them.
Well, no.
Of course,
no. You really don't.
They said
you really don't.
54 million quid.
Yeah.
You promised it to us.
Yeah.
Priti Patel went on record to say we are going to give you this money. She actually sat where you are and made the announcement. Why are they still having to ask for it? So, I mean, this remains the arrangement. There's some administrative arrangements. It is going to arrive. Yeah, there are some administrative arrangements to work through. That'll happen in the coming weeks. But the work that we do in partnership with French authorities is incredibly important, and we would like it to be more successful still, because there are still too many, as you rightly alluded to, over the last couple of days, and it's very dependent on the weather. But there are still too many people attempting that life-threatening journey. So when might the money? Might they no longer be having to ask for the money? Is it going to be before Christmas? Is it going to be before the end of the month? Look, these things will be worked out. I mean, there are governmental. You said in the coming weeks, didn't you? There are departmental processes that you go through, and I would expect that to happen in the coming weeks. I couldn't tell you exactly which day or whatever, but it will come through. OK, and just a quick thought for our viewers on Jersey this morning. They're a little bit worried that the French might stop their fuel supply, aren't they? Do you want to reassure them? Yeah, France and ourselves are some of the strongest allies in the world. You said that before, Minister, but with a great deal of can I just, if I may, just interject and make the point that one of the French ministers said it's time that you Brits grew up. You decided that you wanted to leave Brexit. Get on with your side of the channel. It doesn't sound to me as though it's a particularly strong bond at the moment. Let's be clear. And they're threatening to cut the supply. We are getting on with Brexit. I mean, we've done Brexit. We have, in the famous phrase, got Brexit done. And now we are maximising... It's looking really great in the shops at the moment. And now we are maximising the opportunities that there are with trade around the world, with new kinds of relationships in academia, in industry, and so on. Yes, there are, by the way, there are also... supply chain issues. They're not all to do with Brexit, by the way. I know sometimes it suits people to say that, but some of these types of issues are applying in other countries in different ways as well, where Brexit never came and knocked on their door. Minister, so let's just not reassure the people in Jersey that their lights will stay on.
I have absolute confidence in our relationship and the strength and depth of our relationship with the Republic of France.
So the lights will stay on and they will definitely still have a fuel supply from France?
Yes.
Thank you, Minister. Appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.